What was your relationship with your father like?
Well, my biological father, I didn't meet until much later. I never met him.
How old were you the first time you met him?
18. And so he didn't recognize me. And then my stepfather was the man who closed his eyes to all my mother's activities. And so my brother is his. And I think the reason my brother wasn't trafficked was maybe because he was clearly more interested in my brother. So he just really closed his eyes. But I did try to tell him, and I write that in my book, by the way, I did try to tell him, and he didn't believe me when I was a child. So my mother he was away a lot. He was a cameraman. He was traveling a lot. But when he was there, she would literally get out of their bed, and then I would be ready in my bed, and then she would let the car drive down, just let it without turning on the engine, just to be quiet. And then at the bottom of the driveway, she would start the motor, and she would drive me to events, and then she would pick me up around dawn. That was how it usually worked. And he was asleep in bed, and I thought later maybe he thought she was having affairs. She was doing that also, but he never wondered. And she made up stories also about what had happened to me. For example, at one point she started saying that I was a real tomboy and that I was climbing in trees, which I never did, and I was not a tomboy. But she was saying that because I was covered in bruises. And so that explained it, and then he accepted whatever she said.
When your mom is dropping you off or picking you up, the first time this happened, how was she explaining to you? Like, are you pleading and saying, Mom, please don't take me anymore to a place like this? I don't want to go there. And if you said that, what did she tell you?
Well, I think my mother's a psychopath, that she really had one victim, that was me. So I was an extension that deserved all her wrath. So I have said I wasn't going to go, and she dragged me by my hair one time. But most of the time, because I was her little helper, I was trying to please her more than anything. And then my mother was extremely sadistic.
But did you ever plead and say, Mom, please don't take me today? Please don't take me today?
I said, I once said, I'm not going.
And what did she tell you?
She dragged me by my hair. She would get very anxious before we left. But of course I was going to go. I mean, you understand, children, and you have children. So children are going to do whatever. I was doing everything to please her. I was trying. She was the person I was most attached to. So I was trying to tell myself that she loved me, because you have to know that you're loved as a child. And so I was trying to please her as much as possible. So most of the time I wasn't going to do anything against her. But there was another element, was that with my mother, because she never saw me, she just saw whatever she saw was an extension, something that just was nothing, had nothing to do with me. Because she didn't see me at all, I was receiving more reflection of things that were true about me by these pedophiles in the network, frankly, that were seeing intelligence, or they were seeing beauty. And so at times it was actually more comfortable. It was better to be in the network than to be with my mother, because that constant projection of hers was very difficult to live with.
So this entire time when she's dropping you off and picking you up, you're not controlled. Like, it's, you see it in the movies where the owner has you in a room upstairs and people come in and out and they handle their business and you're away from mom and dad. That's not the case. This is mom is dropping you off and coming and picking you up at dawn.
Yes, so it was different in that way, that my mother was not in the network herself, although she wanted to. She looked up to these people. She would have done anything to belong. But because I think her particular way that her mental illness showed, she was almost too enthusiastic. She would not have been able to keep the secret. So she didn't get in, but it was as if she was envious that I was It was as if she was sending me in her stead, that she would have wanted that kind of sexual attention. That's really what she wanted all the time, the sexual attention.
How was her relationship with her mom and dad?
She was born in 1939, before the war. Her mother died when she was 5, just after the war. And so her father, whom I did know, he was inappropriate. He did one thing to me that was inappropriate. So
her father, your
her
grandfather.
father. So she grew up in a town in Belgium during the war, in her early years during the war, and then lost her mother at a very early age. And I can only assume that there was sexual abuse happening, because that's how she always acted. I have gone through more than 30 years of healing from sexual abuse, all kinds of sexual abuse. And so that journey of healing, which is really, what makes me aware of these things, that's, she acted like someone who was sexually abused and never understood that she was more than that. When you get as a child, there's something that happens when you're a child and you're innocent and you're the light of God, and you are innocent, and your innocence is your true self. That's who you are. That's your light. And when you are sexually abused, it's like you feel that you've lost that innocence and that you can never have it back. There's the trauma of sexual abuse is such that, when trauma means you're going to hope, you wish that it was yesterday. If there's a big loss, you just want it to be the day before, when this hadn't happened yet. You just want to go back. With sexual abuse, it's like they steal your light. They steal your life. They steal your innocence. And you feel that you've lost it because you're a child and you don't know that you don't deserve this because you assume that you did. And then there are the children that can never get back to that light. And the network and the way that the network operates is all to keep you in the dark. And it's run by people that are not in touch with themselves on that pure level, on that level of, I am light, I am a child of God. And when that's lost, when the abuse gives this message that I have to put out sexually in order to be loved, then you get this message. Then that's how you get validated. That's how you want your attention. And my mother acted like that, like someone who had no connection to herself and who was just constantly trying to get sexual validation from all men.
So you and your mother, from 6 years old till what age was it? Till
11.
11 years old. This is happening when you're saying 6 hours a week. That's the specific number you gave?
I gave that specific number, but it's an approximation. It wasn't every week. And sometimes it wasn't every week, but other times I was gone for the summer of 1972. I was gone 2 months from home. I wasn't home at all.
Where were you at? You were with the traffickers?
I was with the traffickers.
And your mom wasn't there with you?
The first month, no. The first month I was in the United States, being trafficked in the United States by a powerful billionaire who was basically triaging me and training me in his homes.
Who is this?
I'm not saying who that is yet. I have to be careful what I say. I can't just flop these names out. I have to.
Would this be a person we would know?
Definitely, you would know. You would know the name.
Alive or dead?
Dead. He was, he was taking me here. I was in the United States, so I was either in his homes, 3 of his homes I spent time in, or I was in the room in the daytime sometimes, in a bedroom, or I was even at a family's near DC for a week, basically parked in a family, nice family that treated me well, probably satanic family, and that were very happy to do a favor for this man. And then I was, after that, was taken to Germany, and I was there for another month in a facility in Heidelberg for what was my mind control training. And this is 1972, and I was 9 years old.
Mind control training at 9 years old?
Yeah.
Why did they take you there?
when I met this billionaire, so in 1972, you had the Bilderberg meeting that happened in Belgium. So for that event, Paul van den Boeynants made sure that he probably did many things around there, but basically to please this powerful American that was there for the Bilderberg meeting, he staged a ritual.
And so why would they need to train you, though?
The mind control training, he had plans for me. And, all right, I can say something. He had me in his homes and everything to get me used to the life of the elite so that I would know how to eat, so that I would recognize good clothes, so that I would be comfortable in these environments. And alongside that, we went to on one of the islands on the northeastern coast of the United States and saw there, and this was a Rothschild who was there.
Rothschild.
A Rothschild, yeah.
And is this who you're talking about?
Yeah, so I'm saying we were with Evelyn the Rothschild for 1 day only. And it was clear that this billionaire, who you would think is just as powerful as this Rothschild, was not as powerful in the network as he was. And he was asking for permission to make the star that he wanted to make of me. Well, he didn't want to make me into a star. He wanted to make me into an elite sex slave where I would become famous in France. And then with that role, I would attract the most powerful men in the world and I would be able to spy on them for him and so forth.
Is that David Rockefeller?
I'm not saying. I can't say this. All right.
Only reason I say that is because I pulled up the list from 2012 attendees and I went through all the guests on the right that says U.S. from the Bilderberg meeting.
Okay.
Rob, if you go a little bit lower and zoom in and you put U.S., right there, you'll see the names that shows. I know this is...
Just give me a minute. Well, I can't lie, but it's scary. Yeah, might as well. Okay, there you go.
You've never talked about this.
I've never said his name.
You know, you hear these stories and you wonder, there's no way these people are capable of doing something like that. At what point did you know it was him?
When he died.
2017.
Yeah.
So you didn't know till 2017.
But I knew a lot, but I didn't know that it was him.
So how did you know it was him when he died in 2017? Because that was just 7 years ago.
Immediately. I knew immediately. I just saw his face. And first of all, I saw his face, and then immediately a lot of other memories came back with him.
How much time did you spend with him?
Well, I spent quite a lot of time with him in the beginning. So from 72 to 73, this training. So I spent quite a lot of time with him in the U.S. in that first month, in July of 1972, and spent time in his estate in Westchester, and also in his home in New York City, and also in his home in Maine. And on the way to Maine, on his sailboat, we stopped off at Rothschild, who had to give his permission for the persona that he wanted to make out of me. And then Rothschild invited me into the family. And I gave I had not been treated very well up until then. So suddenly I get a very nice invitation. I feel, even this training, even though there was a lot of sex training also, Just let's not make any mistakes here. This is not like I was just suddenly being treated really well. I was being trained sexually as well. But it was the best I'd ever seen in my life at age 9. And when I was invited,
Meaning treatment of elites, like lifestyle, wealth. Is that what you mean by treatment?
No, in the first 3 years in the network by Paul van den Boeynants, I was treated like absolute piece of dirt.
What does that mean?
I was the lowest of the low. He always treated me like, he wasn't worth the time for him to even have a chewing gum on his soul or something, and he just had to pull it off and just resented having to spend any time on me. But he was selling me all over, or whatever he was doing. He was using me for blackmail for people that were supposedly new, or he was giving me to depraved aristocrats. But he didn't want to, I was treated, most of the time I was treated like I was absolute piece of dirt, like I had no value at all.
Did he himself sexually abuse you or no, Paul?
He beat me up.
But not sexually abused you?
I did not get sexually abused by him. He was extremely sadistic. So he did not sexually abuse me. He abused other children, though. And I don't remember being sexually abused by him. But he and a few others that were in charge there just really would treat me like the lowest of the low. So I was used to sort of knowing that it was them, it was their fault. I knew that they treated me that way, but I know that I'm human. So I didn't really fully take it seriously. And I was kind of playing the game to survive, playing this game of whatever they needed me to do. I was doing it. And then in 1972, suddenly 3 years later, I got, treated as very special. And this treatment had a lot to do with the excitement that David Rockefeller felt over the fact that he loved being behind the scenes, creating this slave, this elite sex slave, who was going to make him millions. And I was already sold in the first year. In that year, till I gave my will to the Rothschild. And he asked specifically, he asked, will you be part of the family? And I said, yes. And he asked me to say, I will give my will. And a year later, I did not give my will anymore. And that's why I'm here. That
Why would Rockefeller do that if he's got billions at the time? That's a very powerful family.
He was a pedophile, first of all. And these families...
Rothschild and David, or more David?
The Rothschild, I don't think, was a pedophile.
But David...
He was more powerful, but he was not a pedophile. David Rockefeller was a pedophile. There's a lot of survivors. I work with survivors. There are a lot of survivors out there of David Rockefeller. But I saw him in a certain light, and I've met one other person. Now that we named David Rockefeller, I can tell you that the place where I was taken in Germany, in Heidelberg, the doctor that was in charge there, Hans Harmsen, I have met another survivor that was also a special project of David Rockefeller. And Hans Harmsen, who was the doctor in charge there, she was there too as a special project of him, and she also came across Hans Harmsen.
Harmsen?
Hans Harmsen.
Harmsen.
Yes. There you go. There you go.
And who was he?
I think that he was in charge of the special project of David Rockefeller for the mind control training. And I know one other survivor who went through similar experiences as myself later on.
Did you ever meet him?
Meet him? Oh, yeah.
What was he like?
Horrendous.
Unpack it.
Okay. The way that you're trained in mind control training, it's based on torture. What I was used to doing as a child sex slave was to please men in some way or other, to get on their wavelength so that they wouldn't harm me, so that I could survive. With him, I never got anywhere. I never got through it at all. Most of these pedophiles you could get through in some way. There's some way in which, I could sense intuitively what I needed to do to please them. So with him, there was nothing that I could do to get through to him. It was just completely mean and vicious. And one thing that he would do is I was forced to watch certain things to learn about men's behavior, whether it was, it was their weakness or their sexual preferences or their sexual
desires,
perversions, their sexual perversions. So we're not talking about regular sexual. We're talking about sexual perversions, to recognize those. And so I was forced to watch the films. And first I would see the man in the behavior, just his face, and then seeing it in the behavior, different things. And then I would need to guess based on a face what this person would do. And if I got it wrong, one thing that he did is he would just strangle me until I fainted. And in the fainting...
He would.
Yeah, he would, yeah. And in the fainting, he liked to strangle. And in the fainting, I would realize after a while that in these near-death experiences that my intuition was sharpening. And so it was punishment for not giving the right answer, but it was also part of the training to be able to get more intuitive and sense things without having to use your reason. And one thing he did was he would strangle me, but first he would say, "Was bedeutet das?" What does this mean? And he would point at his own face, and then he would strangle me. And so his face to me means being strangled, or it did. That's how the programmation worked. So when I actually came across his photo, I felt like I was dying. And it took a long time. And I do a lot of yoga and meditation, and I had to really just go into the breathing and really, really just work through that programmation that seeing his face means you're going to die from strangulation. You're going to asphyxiate.
He wanted you to know that.
That is how programmation works in the network. That you know it, and your body has a reaction. And also, it is a way to get you from A to whatever they need you to go. So if this prompt means that, and that was in Heidelberg, he wasn't there all the time. Most of the time, there were 3 handlers that were doing this.
So if you go back to that, Rob, that says right there, he was a bureaucrat in the Nazi Germany. He was responsible for approving eugenic sterilization performed on the disabled. He supported forced sterilization of the mentally handicapped and helped to carry them out to Protestant intermission institutions for which he was responsible.
David Rockefeller also was a eugenicist.
So when you're with David Rockefeller, are you in their estate? Are you in their house? Are you around their family? And if you are,
Not around their family, no. But I was around, I was in 3 of his estates, as I said, and I was around his staff.
Did their staff know what was going on with you or no?
I was in bed with him.